Good morning, everyone. This is Gary Railsback at CAEP, and looks like there's about 9 people registered, either leads or site visitors for our webinar this morning. I would encourage you, while you're just listening, to mute your microphone. That way, if you pick up background noise from cell phones or whatever might be in the background, barking dogs, children, whatever. And then when you do want to talk, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask a question. This is meant to be informal and to make sure that any kind of questions that you have are answered prior to doing your probationary visit. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for being a lead or a site visitor for CAEP. That is the strength of our peer evaluation process, to have people that are practitioners, either from higher ed or K-12, going out and performing these site visits. So today's purpose of our webinar is to explain exactly what probationary accreditation is, how those decisions are made. Secondly, how does an EPP prepare for a probationary site visit? And what are the responsibilities as a site visit team? And then lastly, to ask any kind of questions that you have about the process. So first of all, I wanted to update you on the current policy about accreditation. So prior to April 18th, probationary accreditation was given when somebody did not meet one of the CAEP required components or one of the entire standards. And on April 18th, we omitted that line about the required components. And so anybody who had received probationary accreditation on that prior policy, we changed them over to accreditation with stipulations. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go forward. So currently the policy is when an EPP has a site visit and their case goes to the Accreditation Council, they are granted accreditation for 2 years. And it's because they didn't meet one of the CAEP standards. And that involves a targeted self-study report on that unmet standard, and it's reviewed by a 2 or 3 person site team as a part of a targeted site visit. And then after the visit, the site visit report is submitted to the Accreditation Council for review. I do want to make clear that this webinar is to talk about probation and not accreditation with stipulations. And just so we're clear on that, accreditation with stipulations is a virtual visit. So there's actually not people on campus, where probation, there is a site visit. To give you an idea of how this looks one semester, so if we go back to last spring, we had 49 institutions that were reviewed by the Accreditation Council. 8 received stipulations, 4 got probation, 33 got full accreditation, 1 got initial accreditation, and there were 3 revocations. And of those revocations, the second one up there, or the last one, I'm sorry, the one that had standards 4 and 5 not met, they appealed their decision, and the appeals panel said they met standard 4, and so they were then moved to probation. So there has been a little bit of movement. So as you get assigned a case for a probationary visit, and you have any questions about that, feel free to give me a call, and we can try to clear up any kind of movement that came from their initial and maybe their most recent decision. So overall, I looked at the last 4 semesters, and if we start on the left here, we had 55 cases that went before the council. We had 1 out of 55 that didn't meet a standard. Spring, we had 5 out of 50. Fall of 17, we had 6 out of 47. Spring of 17, we had 1 out of 19, and that's for a total of 13 out of 171 cases. So that's 7%. However, there was some change after those initial. So if you look at the middle column there, fall 17, you see that originally it was 6 out of 47, and then it got changed to 3 out of 47. So there's now only 3 from that semester. And those were cases that had it on a required component. Most of them were out of standard 4, or it could have been 5.3 and 5.4. And so then they were moved from probation to stipulation. So it's not a big number. Originally it was 7%, and now it's less than that. This chart gives you an idea of where we're seeing EPPs not meeting a standard. And going back over the last 4 semesters, we've had 10 that didn't meet it on standard 5 and 3 on standard 4. So from the EPP side, they write a self-study, and it's focused on the standard that was determined to not be met, plus any stipulations in other standards. We do have one case from this fall where they didn't meet standard 5, but they had one stipulation, I think it was in standard 3. So if they do have a stipulation outside of that major standard, they would also need to be addressing that. The report that they use is the exact same one that they used for their site visit. We just hide the standards that they don't need to address. And so then they need to start all over and address the entire standard. They also need to respond to the Formative Feedback Report, which is written by the site team in their addendum. They also need to provide additional sources and interviews for the site visit, and they need to respond to the site visit report through factual corrections and a rejoinder. So as you can see on this slide, the process is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is the self-study only focuses on the standard or the stipulations that were noted. The site visit team is a little different in that you're not doing all 5 standards. So our policy says a 2 to 3 member team. Most of the time we assign 2 unless it's a really big university that we would feel like we need to do that. We have a lead site visitor that we appoint. I also want to help you understand about the joint team. So CAEP has state agreements with 35 different states. We have about 10 or 12 that specify for a joint visit. And so in this case, if we're going to have a 2 to 3 person team, we would have 2 from a national audience and 1 from their state. And the people that are recommended by the state must be nationally trained. So they can't just be somebody from their state. And to clarify, all of the above people, so everybody assigned to the CAEP team, whether they're from a national audience or state, they're all assigned to write. And then the state consultant, in the agreements that we have with 35 states, they can also attend the formative feedback call and the site visit. They do not normally write one of the standards. They're here to clarify and be there to answer any kind of questions. What happens at the site visit is very similar to a regular site visit, only it doesn't need to be as long. I put here 1 to 2 days. We normally start on Sunday and then have interviews all day Monday. That could be shortened, but it needs to be consensus between the lead and the CAEP coordinator. We don't want the CAEP coordinator or the EPP coming back later and saying they didn't have enough time to provide evidence. And so that can be negotiated. What's set up ahead of time is the normal 3-day. And so if that's going to be modified at all, it would need to be done about 30 days before the site visit. So that travel arrangements can be made. We don't want to be making a lot of last minute travel. Just like a normal site visit, interviews are done, but they're focused only on the standard and stipulations. So since most of these are around standard 5, you don't need to be asking questions about 1, 2, or 3. If it is one around 4, obviously you need to be interviewing people that were involved with that. The AFIs can be addressed, and you can make a recommendation on those. The most important thing is at the bottom of the site visit report, there needs to be a clear recommendation about whether stipulations should be removed or not. That is the quick and dirty on site visits. So now it's time for questions. I'm going to see if we got any in our question box here. Does, yes, the recording is, the webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to leads. So absolutely, you can get a copy of the recording. Any other questions? Okay, we have a question about how is the lead role different on this visit as compared to a regular visit? The main difference is that on a normal visit, you would be writing to 5 standards, and in this case, you're only writing to 1. So the lead would be dividing the team members over how a lot of people do it is having them write to the different components. So for instance, since most of them are around standard 5, you have 5 components to write to. You might assign, let's say, 2 components to each of your other members, and then the lead would only have to respond to 1 of the components. But otherwise, the responsibilities are the same: to be the person to talk with the EPP, come up with an interview schedule, coordinate the team when they're on campus. Everything else is exactly the same. The main difference is on what you would be writing. Second question is, will we be having a conference call to review the report prior to the visit? So if you're talking about the formative feedback call, yes. So that process is exactly the same. You're assigned 2 to 3 members. You go through and review the material, assign them to what you want them to write, and then you would have a formative feedback call to write that formative feedback report. So if that's what you're asking about, yes, that would be the same process. John, I see you sent in a thank you, or no. Boy, my eyes are having a hard time reading the screen this morning. I need to get some new glasses, it looks like. Yeah, John, appreciate you attending, and I hope this was helpful. We'll be sending out a recording of this afterwards, and we'll send it to everybody who participated and to other leads, just so if they have questions. I don't see any other questions, so it looks like this was a short webinar, 15 minutes. Thanks so much for attending. Oh, here's another question. Okay, there's a question about a state agreement. The state agreements are all on our website. But again, there are 35 of them, and they're kind of complicated. So if you want to look that up and then set up a phone call with me, we can go through exactly what the specifics are of that state agreement. It's, we have a person on our staff, Matt Vanover, who works with all of our states, and those are signed by the president, and we need to make sure that we follow those. Some of them have joint visit, as I've addressed here. Some of them have just a state consultant, like for instance, Michigan, they don't send site visitors, they send a state consultant. So they don't write to a standard, but they participate in the site visit and the formative call. So there's a lot of nuances by all those different states. And if you get assigned a probationary visit, feel free to give me a call and we can go through and make sure everything's very clear before any kind of visit. Okay, I got another question here about absolutely. Just give us a call here at the office, and we can set up a one-on-one with you, and hopefully answer any kind of questions you have about the probationary site visit. Okay, looks like that's all the questions for now. So I am going to stop the webinar, and again, it will be, we've been recording it, and it will be put on a YouTube, and we'll send out that information to those of you who participated. Thanks again for coming today, and if you have any other questions, feel free to write me here at CAEP. My email is gary.railsback@capenet.org. Thank you. Have a good day and a great Thanksgiving.